friends, welcome back to the third installment of the Partnership Act series. In the previous two videos, we have covered up to section 11 of this act. To check those videos out, click the I button right here, or you can get the link in the description or as well as the pinned comment. But having said that, let's start today's video from section 12. Hey guys, my name is Akash. I'm a final year law student in South Calcutta Law College and you are watching Lawve. Alright, so talking about section 12, section 12 has 5 clauses A, B, C, D and E. Out of this A, B, D and E are fairly straightforward. Only clause C has some intricacies and requires some explanation. So first quickly get done with clauses A, B, D and E. Okay, so clause A of section 12 says that every partner has a right to take part in the business. So suppose if X, Y and Z has opened a partnership firm, all of them will have equal right to take part in the business regardless of the fact of what is the weightage of capital that each of them has brought into the firm. Okay, simple. Clause B of section 12 says that every partner of a firm is bound to attend to their duties diligently in the conduct of the business of the firm. Now I think this applies to partnership as well as life. Whatever duties you have to attend to them diligently and to the best of your abilities, be it in a partnership firm or in life. Okay, now clauses D and E, we'll see them together. So clause D says that every partner of a firm has the right to access, inspect and copy every book of the firm. Clause E says that in the event of death of a partner, her legal representative or heir will have the same rights. So that's clauses D and E. Now let's move on to clause C that requires a little explanation. So in decisions regarding matters in the ordinary course of business of the firm, every partner will have the right to express their opinion and the decision will be taken by a majority vote. Whereas in decisions regarding a change in the nature of the business of a firm, a decision can only be taken by the consent of all the partners. So for example, let's say there's a firm called Baburao and Baburao. Now they're in the business of marketing medicines. Now a decision regarding the fact whether or not to supply their medicines to a particular dealer or whether to add a new product to the lineup, these can be taken by majority votes because these are decisions taken in the ordinary course of business of the firm. But suppose the firm wants to move into manufacturing of medicine and move away from marketing. Now this decision has to be taken by the consent of all the partners because this is a decision that is regarding the nature of business of the firm. The nature of business of the firm is getting affected here. There is a change in the nature of the business of the firm. And in such a case where the nature of the business of the firm is getting affected, a decision can only be taken by consent of all the partners. So I hope now it is clear to you when a decision in a firm can be taken by majority votes and when consent of all the partners are required. Now, having said all those, I must also mention that the first line of section 12 says that it is subject to any contract between the partners. This essentially means that if there is a provision in the partnership deed that is in direct violation of any of the provisions contained in this section, that is section 12, the provisions of the partnership deed will prevail. So suppose if in the partnership deed it is mentioned that a decision regarding a change in the nature of the business can be taken by majority votes, then it will prevail. Then in that particular firm, decisions regarding the change of business in the firm can be taken by majority votes even though it is in direct violation of clause C of section 12 because it is written in the first line of this section that this section is subject to contract between the parties. When you study interpretation, you will see that when such a phrase is written, then any contract between the parties will be superior, will hold more ground than the provisions written in the section. Now we can move on to section 13. Now section 13 again starts with subject to any contract between the parties and you will find this phrase in many sections of this act. So this essentially means that again if there is no express contract to the effect, then the provisions of this section, section 13 will take effect. But if there is a partnership deed, a contract between the partners and a provision of that contract directly contradicts any of the provisions of section 13, the provision of the partnership deed will prevail over the provisions of section 13. Having said that, clauses A and B of section 13 are very straightforward. Clause A says that since the partners are essentially owners of the company, they're not entitled to any remuneration for any work they are doing on behalf of the firm. They are only entitled to shares from the profits of the firm, but they are not entitled to get any remuneration. Now, regarding the share of profits, clause B says that every partner of the firm is entitled to equal shares from the profit of the firm, and when the firm incurs a loss, they are liable to contribute to the loss equally, regardless of the fact in what ratio they have brought in capital to the firm. But again, it is subject to a contract between the partners. So if partnership deed mentions any other ratio, if partnership deed mentions that in a partnership of XYZ, they will get one will get 50 and the other two will get 25, and in case of loss, one will provide 50% of the loss and the other two will provide 25 and 25, that will prevail. But in the absence of that, every partner will be entitled to equal profits and will have to contribute to losses in equal ratio, regardless of the fact of the ratio in which they brought in capital to the firm. Cool? So these two are clear? I hope so. Now, suppose in a particular scenario, in a particular partnership deed, it is mentioned that the partners will be entitled to some interest on the capital they brought into the firm. Whenever a person invests their money, say in a savings account, they keep their money, or in a fixed deposit, they are entitled to some interest, right? Similarly, when the partners bring in capital to the firm, they can agree in the partnership deed that they will be entitled to some interest on that capital apart from the profits that they will be entitled as and when the firm makes it. Now, in these scenarios, this interest can only be given out of the profits of the firm. So, in a particular year, if the profit margins of the firm is less, then in that year, the interest rate can also be less. In another year, maybe the firm has incurred losses. It has not made any profit. In that particular year, the partners will not be entitled to get any interest because interest can only be paid on the capital. Interest can only be paid out of the profits of the firm. Unless, of course, there is an agreement that contradicts this particular provision. If there is, that will take effect. I've said it many times. If there is a contract in the contrary, that will take effect. But in absence of that, interest on the capital can only be given out of the profits of a firm. And if the firm doesn't make a profit in that particular year, the partners will not be entitled to any interest on the capital. Okay, so that was clause C for you. The clause D also mentions a similar but a somewhat different scenario. So suppose a partner brings in money above and beyond the capital that she has agreed to bring in into the firm for whatsoever reasons. She does that. Now, on that particular money that she brings above and beyond the capital, more than that of the capital, she will be entitled to get a 6% per annum interest on that amount. So understand the difference here. If the partners want interest on the capital, there has to be an express agreement to that effect, and such interest can only be paid out of the profits of the firm. But when a partner brings in money above and beyond the capital, there is no need of an express contract. She will automatically be entitled to a 6% per annum interest, and there is also no bar that such interest will have to be paid from the profits of the firm as it was in the previous case. So this is a slight difference between clause C and D of section 13, which I want you to understand very carefully. Right. Now, clause E. Suppose in the ordinary course of business, one of the partners make a payment on behalf of the firm. For example, let's say in that medicine marketing firm, one of the manufacturers asks for payment. Now, one of the partners from her own pocket makes the payment. Now, she will be entitled to get reimbursed from the funds of the firm. This is clause E subclause 1 of section 13. Now, there can be another scenario. Suppose in the face of emergency, one of the partners makes some payment out of her own pocket to save the firm from losses. For example, say a firm is engaged in trucking. Now, one of their trucks during transport gets seized by the police for whatsoever reason. Now, that truck was carrying some perishable goods which will rot if they are not transported in time, and that will cause huge losses to the firm. At that time, only one of the partners was available for communication. She rushes to the spot, liaises the whole thing, pays fine out of her own pocket, and gets the truck discharged. Now, this partner should be entitled to get reimbursed from the funds of the firm. Now, this is subclause 2 of clause E. Clear? Okay, now clause F is iska ulta. When a firm is entitled to get indemnified from one of its partners. So when a firm incurs some loss due to a willful neglect of one of its partners, the firm is entitled to get indemnified for such losses. So for example, again in that medicine marketing firm, the manufacturer informs one of the partner that a payment is needed to be done. Now that partner neither paid her out from her own pocket, nor from the fund of the firm, nor she informs any other partners of the firm. And after some days, the manufacturer stops supply of medicine to that firm because of default of payment. And for that, the firm incurs some losses. Now, the firm is entitled to get indemnified from that particular partner for whose willful neglect the loss was incurred. This is basically clause F of section 13. Right, so that's it for today's video. To recap, we have studied section 12 and section 13 today. Both the sections are subject to contract between the partners. That is, if there is a partnership deed and any of the provision of that partnership deed is in direct contradiction with any of the provisions of these sections, the provision of the deed will prevail over the provision of these sections. I don't know how many times I have said that, but this is very, very important. Try to keep this in mind, and you'll find this in many sections of this act. In section 12, we have learned about the conduct of the business, that is how the business of the firm shall run, and about consent required in different matters from the partners. In section 13, we have learned about the mutual rights and liabilities of the partners, and we have seen scenarios where the partners are entitled to interest, and also seen some scenarios where the partners are entitled to get indemnification from the firm, and also saw a scenario where the firm is entitled to get indemnified from the partners. In the next video, we'll pick up from section 14 of this act. I hope the discussion up to this point was very clear to you, and if you still have any questions, put down in the comments and we'll definitely reply. Like and share this video among your peers, and subscribe to this channel if you like our content on a regular basis. And also, please do follow us on the various social media handles that must be coming on the screen right now. Bye bye, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.